thank you guys first and foremost for joining. It's our 13th Los Angeles Sitecore User Group. We'll talk about the path to composable. So we'll kick off with a quick intro into XEM Cloud. So I'll talk about what we can expect from XEM Cloud, what we know so far, and what we can do to prepare for migrating to XEM Cloud based on what we know so far. And then I'll hand it off to Martin, and Martin will walk us through the right way of doing Sitecore upgrades. So we, whatever is left out of the upgrades that we do need to perform on Sitecore, so they will be a lot less painful. All right, so let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay. Let's see here. All right. Okay. Let me know if you can see it. You guys see, Martin, can you see the screen? Okay, cool.
Yep.
Adam? Hey, that works. We can turn that on at the end. Thank you. All right, so what can we expect from XEM Cloud, right? So we'll spend about 15, 20 minutes or so here. So as I'm going through it, don't hesitate to ask questions, right? So pause me. Feel free to ask questions as we go, or wait till the very end. You know, it's completely up to you. Interesting. Was he crap? This happened to us before? So, anyways, let's look into the XEM Cloud. So, what can we expect? Well, what we know is the XEM Cloud is scheduled to be released mid-summer. What we can expect, though, is unlikely, a fully mature, ready for prime time platform, right? Just like with any software release, it's probably going to be an MVP. My bet is actually, my hypothesis is we'll probably be looking at around the symposium time when we'll see a workable product, a product that can compete with what's out there now. So what I mean by that is something that will deliver more value than the current solutions out there, right? So the XEM or XP, functionality-wise, scope-wise, so something that's at least at par with what we have right now to make it worth for customers to migrate into the SaaS solution. So one of the interesting things is XEM Cloud will still allow customization. So even XEM Cloud is going to be a full SaaS solution, right? So it's going to be fully hosted by Sitecore. Great things, no more upgrades, right? So that is going out the window. No more painful platform setups, issues with scaling and so forth. Sitecore is going to take care of all of that. However, there are some trade-offs, and we'll talk about it here. Sitecore did say that they plan to allow customizations with their own deployment models. Right? So this is something that they'll provide access to, customizing some of the existing pipelines. However, there will be pipelines that we won't be able to touch moving forward. And it's likely those will be the pipelines like the HTTP begin request, right? These are the pipelines that can affect either security or performance. So with Sitecore taking on XEM Cloud, they're going to remove our access from being able to slow down the system as much as possible. Right. So
thank you.
Hi there, Troy. Welcome.
Hello.
Hello. Welcome. So they're going to remove as much access as possible to prevent developers from slowing down the platform or making it insecure, right? So with the SaaS platform, that responsibility is going to be on them, but they still do plan to allow us some customizations in the platform, which is good news. It may be something in the way of scripts that can be deployed, but we're yet to see. Now, with that in mind, what we should focus on is if we're working on another integration or a new Sitecore build, some of the things that we got to take into consideration is architecting less intrusive solutions, right? So solutions that don't tap into Sitecore pipelines as much as possible. So take a different route if you can avoid it. So that way it'll be easier to migrate that solution into the XM Cloud architecture. So this is an important one. XM Cloud will only support headless implementations. So this is a big one. And headless implementations with the layout service, GraphQL, custom headless implementations, they use custom API, for instance, will not work here. So if you're looking at another platform redesign, let's say website redesign or platform rebuild, so this is one thing that you want to keep in mind is in order for that solution to be future-proof, you want to start building everything new on Sitecore Headless, and that's layout service and GraphQL. XM Cloud will use the Edge, Sitecore Edge for content delivery. So that's your GraphQL, right? So that is the only way that will be exposed to us to pull content. So Sitecore won't be able to host any of our code anymore, whether it's web forms, MVC, or geez, God forbid XSLT, if anyone's still using that. None of that is going to be supported. So for the first time, Sitecore will be dropping legacy support for all the past frameworks. So this is important. Now, rendering host that's out there right now that allows us to run MVC on Jamstack will not work. It's not proper headless implementation. We had some questions around that. Custom built API layers also won't work. Again, we can't host code on Sitecore. We can only call, let's say, GraphQL services to retrieve content from it. Some of the Sitecore implementations sort of jumped ahead of the curve with their own GraphQL implementations before even Sitecore released GraphQL. They created their own API layers. However, that, even though it's headless, it will still have to be rebuilt to work with Sitecore headless services, right? So, however, if you do have a presentation layer that connects to a custom layer, it's relatively straightforward to create an adapter and have it call, let's say, a GraphQL endpoint. SXA does have a roadmap into the headless space. So SXA is getting rebuilt with support for React. So if you are currently planning a redesign, target the headless architecture, but also you'll be better positioned if you target React. React is a framework of choice for building websites for the most part. They own the majority of the front end market anyway. So it's a good idea to go with React to begin with, but now there's a lot more reason for that. We don't know if it's going to be, the SXA is going to be rebuilt with Vue or Angular, potentially, just because GSS supports those three. What we do know for a fact is React is going to be supported. So by the time, let's say you rebuilt the website SXA with React, the new version of SXA supporting React will come out and you'll be properly aligned. So do we actually have to migrate to XM Cloud? Now, if you, let's say there will be customers who just built their website, maybe within the past year. Now they're being told that there's a new platform coming out with lots of great benefits, and that could be discouraging. Could be frustrating to think about that you now have to migrate again, but you don't have to. As much benefit as you're going to get out of the XM Cloud and other Sitecore composable tools, there's still a lot of value in XP. And a lot of brands will still be better off with a centralized set of content and marketing tools in Sitecore XP versus having a composable architecture, especially while things are still sort of being stitched together. Right? There's massive value in migrating from, let's say, XP to XM Cloud with Sitecore Personalized for omni-channel purposes. Now, Sitecore Personalized has massive advantages over the capabilities of the XDB in terms of personalization or split testing. It's light years ahead. But if you haven't tapped out of the limits of the XP, if you're not having issues there, you haven't reached that limit of pulling value out of the platform, right? So there's unless there are other maintenance considerations or digital transformation or compliance that's pushing you to migrate to XM Cloud, the XP is still going to be a valid platform. One concern with XP is the next major release may be the last one. That is the big concern. The roadmap is unclear yet for XP, so Sitecore hasn't officially confirmed any of this. This is information coming in from different channels, so this is unofficial. Don't take the word for it, but keep that in mind when you plan roadmaps internally at your organizations around XP integrations, XP expansion, and so forth. Although it is a great platform and it will continue bringing a lot of value, Sitecore's focus is most certainly on the new composable tools. There's a huge R&D department that's been created, hundreds of people working on stitching these products together. So everything, all the effort, all the primary focus is on the new composable stack. So now this is how we would position ourselves better for migrating our solutions. So what about the marketing tools, right? What about the XDB? Do we get that into the CDP? Can we? Well, so yes, we can, but only partially. So for those who are actively using the XDB and that data is clean, which is important, in my experience, I find a lot of clients use the XDB either. However, they're not capturing data correctly. Let's say their sessions aren't configured properly or whatnot. For multiple reasons, that data could be dirty. And for that reason, a lot of times when we see Sitecore upgrades, in fact, accounts choose to forgo upgrading their XDB, especially if it's a large jump. With the XDB and BoxEver CDP, so the Sitecore CDP, the new product, there are some good news, there are some bad news. The good news is that we can export contact data out of the XDB and easily import that into the CDP. The bad news is that the CDP does not have the same type of API for importing events. So the CDP has a streaming API that is capable of capturing events from the website. It's a simple embed code, it's JavaScript embed code. You drop it on the website and it automatically just starts recording events from the website into the CDP. However, there's no REST API or batch import API for importing events. So if you are heavily using the XDB and if you are heavily relying on historical data that can go far out, let's say more than a few months out, and I'll explain why it's more than a few months out here in a minute, then this is something you have to consider and think about. However, if you're relying on the historical data in your XDB right now for personalization and other purposes, if you're primarily relying on the data that's within, let's say, a few months of capturing it, we can still mitigate that by dropping the embed code from Sitecore Personalize on your website early on. Let's say you're on XP now, you're considering a move to XM Cloud with Personalize, everything got mapped out, you're starting to think about the migration, you're talking to Sitecore about license costs around those support and everything around it. At that point, Sitecore may be able to already set up an instance of the CDP and share an embed code that can be dropped on the website in advance to start accumulating the analytics. So keep that in mind. So what that's going to do is by the time everything gets straightened out with license fees, with the migration plan, if you're on the client side, you probably want to find a Sitecore Platinum partner, for instance, to work with. So once you get through the procurement process, it'll be weeks, if not months, right? By that point, you would have already accumulated weeks and months worth of historical data that now you can start using for personalization. So that plugs right in. Okay. Now, personalized does come with web experiences. If you haven't worked with personalized, if you haven't looked at it, I do recommend taking the learning class, especially if you work for a Sitecore partner. Those are free for you. But there are also plenty of videos on Sitecore Personalized out there in public space already. Sitecore Personalized does come with an easy way to implement personalization using what they call web experiences. Right. So this is a pretty straightforward way to personalize website, create custom components, so they create pop-ups. It's extremely flexible, and you can fine-tune your target audience pretty granularly. That's one of the advantages of the Sitecore Personalized. But one thing to keep in mind is the web experiences don't scale quite well because they're not yet connected to the content source. So when you're, let's say, creating a new personalization experience within Sitecore Personalized, what you're essentially doing is for the component that needs to be shown, you're plugging in static front-end code, HTML, JavaScript, and static content to be shown on the website, right? So instead of in place of a component or in addition to the component or as an overlay, for instance, as a pop-up. So it's fine to do a few of those as experiments, right? Proof of concept. However, once you start getting into the large numbers of it, you've got to be careful. So that's another, I think, gotcha that you have to consider when planning to migrate your personalization rules into Sitecore Personalized. It is most likely you'll end up using what's called the full stack experience, integrating with that for decisioning logic in XEM Cloud. Okay. And then this is what I just mentioned. Full stack experiences will probably be the most commonly used personalization type of personalization in Sitecore Personalized. All right. Does anyone have any questions on this?
$1 million question. So historically, we had lots of modules, and what's gonna be with these modules in future, and what is the future of Sitecore PowerShell extension? So as I understand, that will be partially available for the API that manage the content, partially disabled, because for today it's the ultimate powerful Swiss knife we have. And I'm very curious about its future. Of course, you don't know that, but any assumptions?
Well, it's definitely on the wish list, my wish list for XEM Cloud to have. I completely agree. In fact, I don't even see Sitecore implementations without the Sitecore PowerShell extensions anymore. And if they're not installed, we recommend installing them right away immediately. It just takes a lot of headache away. So it is on my bucket wish list for XEM Cloud. My guess is that it may have some limited functionality. But I hope it's going to be in there. And the reason for that is SXA roadmap is still alive, and the SXA requires the Sitecore PowerShell extensions, right? So I don't think it's going to go away.
It kind of be internal tool for SXA rather than a publicly available something for us to expose the code against. Interestingly, what I see as how I see XEM Cloud is an attempt of Sitecore to get, let's say, storefront or just something like storefront for Order Cloud or for Content Hub for these bits, just to get this web experience for them, rather than they want to get a proper substitute of what we have in XP, because XP, in the way it's done for today, it's not that easy to replace, and switching to Composable may bring you quite improportional value compared to the effort spent for just upgrade. So you won't do upgrade just because of upgrade. You have a bigger purpose. So I don't see anyone will be doing upgrades without any reason, rather than it will be worked for new solutions. So any greenfield, yes, but for moving from existing platform solutions, unlikely. I mean, it may be, but I would like to get some sort of a real world example of that. But that's my opinion.
That makes sense. In fact, I'd recommend, if there's anyone who's listening to this on the client side of things, if you have bandwidth, I would start rebuilding it on Headless even now. Start rebuilding it in parallel. You can have some pages running, let's say on SX or MVC, web forms, XSLT, you name it, but then others on Headless, right? There's a way to mix and match. Doesn't create a whole lot of overhead. Is the only thing is you won't be able to, use the JSS components on MVC layouts and vice versa without a whole lot of hacking of the pipes, which you don't want to do. But this would cut the amount of work you'd have to do down the road when you start planning to migrate into the XM Cloud.
I think
how do you think?
I've had several customers talk about, hey, as they're looking to do an upgrade, what do they need to start thinking about in order to start thinking about, because Sitecore, I guess the sellers have been out there talking about XM Cloud to some of my customers, right? So they've been asking like, hey, we're going to do an upgrade. What do we need to do to get ready for XM Cloud? Partially, you're spot on. We need to start talking about like rewriting or migrating to Headless, right? So we've been having a lot of those, or at least I've been having those discussions with a couple of different accounts. I think the interesting part here is going to be what they're going to do with SXA, because a couple of those accounts have been SXA, written in SXA. And then the other part is really around personalization and the CDP. One of the challenges that at least I'm seeing as I'm kind of coming up to speed with the CDP and with just writing this in Headless is, one of my customers, their marketers are used to doing personalization rules and like the custom personalization rules that they've had for a while in XP. And as they're kind of looking at it, and we're looking at proof of concepts with essentially Headless and using Sitecore CDP, they're really like, hey, this is going to be a huge learning curve for me. Some of this is like, hey, I'm doing client-side personalization. How do I get the benefits of like the server-side personalization that I'm used to with Sitecore XP? So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, in fact, let me see if I still have this diagram. We were brainstorming this the other day. And let me see if I can pull this into view. We were just quickly throwing ideas and hypothesizing about what the future is going to look like. But here, let me show this. It's a Visio diagram. So right now, I mean, the easiest way to do personalization. Can you guys see the Visio?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So the easiest way, and this is the native way of doing personalization for the web in Sitecore Personalize, using web experiences. And the way that works is you set up a web experience, you set up your target audience, target pages, for instance, and then you, like you said, you plug in static code, HTML, JavaScript, whatnot, into that component. And that is what gets shown when the conditions are met. So what happens is, let's say the request comes into Sitecore responds with the source code, right, for the page. That source code of the page contains the embed JavaScript code for Sitecore Personalize, then Sitecore Personalize, then that JavaScript code goes out to Personalize sends the information required. Personalize makes a decision whether it needs to show that experience or not. So there's 4 trips. So one to Sitecore, comes back, then depending on where you also have this embed code, you may experience a bit of a flash, especially if that's something that needs to be shown on page load, that new experience. But essentially the DOM loads and then your JavaScript hits, unless it's in the header, right? So there's a bit of a delay here. So that's one way of doing things. With full stack experiences, what we can do is we can actually continue using Sitecore Personalize rules to use the full stack experience. So the rules engine in Sitecore is Boolean based, right? If it returns either true or false, whether the condition is met or not met. Personalization, the decisioning engine in Sitecore Personalize is different in the way where it actually returns various data models, and you can define what you want it to return, true or false, a list of things, a list of recommended products, and so forth. So it's flexible enough to return various data objects, various structures. So, but what we could do here, in essence, is create a custom rule for various types of objects that it could return and make it very flexible and continue using the Sitecore personalization engine in combination with Sitecore Personalize, where Personalize is now acting as a pure decisioning engine. So it doesn't dictate the presentation, doesn't dictate the content. It's purely used as a decisioning engine. This way, we're still making 4 trips, right? So to Sitecore then hits Personalize responds with a decision, and then we're responding back with the markup, right? The markup page. There was some argument about this potentially even being slower, but I'm not so sure, because here we may even have to wait for things to load in the browser before we can hit Personalize, where here things are more instantaneous. So that's one way of doing things, but I think this is it's not going to be the long-term way. This is almost like a patch, right? A stopgap solution. So if you're on XEM and XP with Personalize, these are the 2 ways that are available to us to personalize. The second one is more native. That's the way we're used to doing it. What we've seen from XEM Cloud in terms of personalization and personalization configuration is different. So the UI is going to be different. We'll be able to create our own segments and then create scenarios for those segments. So the experience is going to be different. So even if we create these rules here in the Sitecore rules engine, that's going to change with XEM Cloud.
I actually do like your second proposed diagram, and my first concern was also about some sort of delay, because this second round trip goes almost every time. It's not something you will cache. It's not something you will make hidden. But from the user experience, I think it's even better. As you fairly explained, the first approach, it becomes a little bit flashy, so you have to implement specific front-end CSS techniques just to hide this flashy behavior, or do this delay with placeholder, so at least nothing jumps on a page, while second returns more solid page. And I very like idea of mixing it with the Sitecore engine.
Yeah, and you could really accommodate the second scenario with just a handful of flexible custom rules. You could say if, let's say, rules ID or rules name, the name of the decision model, let's say, or full stack experience and personalized, returns something equals blank, free entry, for instance, then you have, perform the condition. So that's a super flexible rule. It's going to accommodate a lot of different personalization scenarios. And then we can do those for multiple data structures. Let's say if a recommended product list contains this product, then go to town on that, with creating those. But that will, allow us to scale our personalization rules until we get the new personalization engine with XEM. Because here with this use case, we're still statically creating components in Personalize. Once you start talking about scale, then you start running into issues with, well, how do you deploy this static code right into these components? How do you keep styling consistent between these components here and Personalize or markup structure and then components in your Sitecore XM solution? Then content concerns where you have to update content in Personalize and then in Sitecore XM, so all these things start piling up and the overhead will just be too much eventually. So this is why I recommended the first approach is good for POCs, for quick tests, something that doesn't have to scale. That's it could even be long living, but we won't be able to do a lot of this. This will allow us to scale.
The first approach is what a lot of our customers are used to using Google Optimize or something outside of Sitecore XP are very familiar with, right? And like I know, like I have customers that use Marketo or Adobe Target, and they're stuck in that first model. And a lot of times we're asked to solve problems of like that, like the little flicker thing you talked about, right? I see a version of both of this where Sitecore XP didn't allow this, where you could just inject a button onto onto the site, which customers may still want to do like small things like that on the first approach. But when it comes to really like switching out like carousels or specific content or decision like engine or recommendation engine, that second approach is really where it needs to be at. And
Yep.
so at least without doing any thinking, not knowing what is coming on XM Cloud, where I've been looking at this is really how do I do this using Next.js and the middleware.
That's a great question. So we've been hypothesizing about that. I mean, one thing we do know is everything's moving towards the edge, right? So the rules engine, everything is moving towards the edge. What we saw, at SuckCon was personalization done at the edge. We'll be writing our code that accounts for those things, using Next.js. The presentation, if you guys do have a chance, I'm sure the videos will start coming out from SuckCon relatively soon, but there's a video from Andy Cohen, and I think he also did a presentation during the Atlanta user group. But there's one presentation about setting up, launching the XM Cloud, and then there's another session about personalization. So that was interesting. The only drawback of that is now during that session, the personalization was still coded. So, but that kind of gave insight into where things are going. Things are moving towards the edge. Right now, we can still do some personalization at the edge, but the way things are working now, there's an inherent problem with scale. We can't scale personalization. Say with SSG, we can't generate large numbers of page variations, right? And that exponentially grows when you have multiple personalization scenarios on there. Uniform had an interesting fix for it, right? They exported rules into the edge. So we'll see, if Sitecore is going to take a similar route or not. So it could.
Yeah, I think they may take the uniform approach. I do interested to see that Symphony Box in your third diagram. That's something that came up at Symposium last year.
Yeah, Symphony is exciting. Looking forward to it. I'm still trying to chase the release date for it. We'll see. I'm hearing various dates, and anything from a couple weeks to later this year. So we'll see.
And I also want to add that the answer is coming out shortly, because Sitecore demo team expects sooner to upgrade their Edge project. For those who does not know, that's GSS Headless Composable demo, which will be upgraded to XM Cloud. With parts of this upgrade, will be adding SXA to the demo to benefit from its features. And the internal release of the next SXA version, they are playing around it, but it will come in publicly into public space with the next version of Sitecore. No idea what it will be, probably 10.3 or whichever. So from what we know is SXA team is not going to give up, and they already made a great progress in terms of going headless, and that was a very loud promise given by them, because they've done big work, and it will be there. So SXA definitely will be somewhere with XM Cloud. So what to say? Looking forward.
Yeah, I'm excited. So the stack, the composable stack is solid. I mean, we talked to Gartner, we talked to multiple analysts. I mean, Sitecore's positioned well. Everyone's holding their breath for Sitecore being able to stitch all of these products properly. And I think they, based on what I'm hearing with an army of developers, with the R&D, have an office in Greece now, just a large office that's being built out there. So a lot of good things are happening. I can't wait to see the outcome. I can't wait to see these things flowing together. I have a couple blog articles on how I envision the composable stack will come together. What I'd like to see is these products be self-aware and intelligent. Right? So when you activate, let's say, Order Cloud, it knows that you already have XM Cloud, and then or when you connect Content Hub to XM Cloud asked if you want to import some of the content from Content Hub. So it's contextually aware. So for like Apple products, right? They make that usability seamless when you're working within the network. And I think Sitecore will try to do some of that because they have to create that stronger together story, right? That stickiness between Sitecore products. So I'm excited to see what they'll come up with.
Yeah, I could see them also pushing content from XM to personalize, very similar to how Adobe does that with their AEM and Adobe Target.
Exactly. Yep. Exactly. Alrighty. Any other questions, guys?
Not a question, but just one more thing to add, which was not asked, but I want to add. So we spoke about headless, and we have something as .NET Core, which is headless, in fact. So I want to confirm that .NET Core will be supported along with other frameworks, which is Vue, React, Angular, all that bits. And of course, main implementation will be, of course, Next.js with SSG.
Good point. Good point. Everyone's talking about front end, right? That seems to be the hot topic. But I think it's just a matter of time until we realize that we can't leave back end behind. A lot of business logic will be exported to middleware, to middle layers. APIs still need to be written, right? A lot of, let's say, the business logic that we currently have running in the solutions, that will now become, let's say, a web service or, a scaled microservices architecture that you can just paint for certain things. So that's still there. So as a result, Sitecore's, you're right that they did confirm that they will continue supporting the developer experience, DevX, .NET Core, SDK. I think as the composable stack matures, as composable solutions mature, we'll see a lot more need in that SDK. Right now, especially with SSG, things will be relatively rudimentary until we get the personalization story, the scalability issues worked out. But once all that is worked out, I think we'll see the .NET Core growing. An interesting thing with that is also I see DevOps exploding as well. So if anyone's been wondering about what to learn next, I would say DevOps is going to position you really well and give you a lot of job security if you're a developer or an architect watching this. With the complexity of composable stack, with all the moving pieces that'll need to be stitched together, right? Because we can't just smack all of our business logic into Sitecore anymore. It has to live somewhere, has to be an endpoint. With microservices architectures, with all these things, there's a lot of complexity that needs to be still deployed, orchestrated. So we're now looking at multiple solutions. We're looking at facilitating multiple appliances on the cloud. All these things need to be orchestrated, managed, and deployed, patched, updated, upgraded, whatnot. So there's a lot there to talk about on the DevOps side.
Security, and security.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
All
I'd
right.
be interested in hosting options there as well, because right now Sitecore is really cozied up to Vercel, but when it gets into security, like IP whitelisting and stuff, I know Vercel is like, hey, we don't have that. Fine, you should be doing better security, right? Where a lot of our clients are either on AWS or Azure, and seeing how we're going to host and deploy these applications in something besides Vercel.
Exactly. Yep. Good point.
The next demo from demo team expected to be on Vercel. If I remember right, it was PlaySummit, the name of this demo. So I personally did not ever had access to it, but it's coming. Maybe it's in some branches there already publicly available, but maybe not. It's good for investigate, but I personally did not test it or have it in any way.
If that's the same PlaySummit demo as we did for the webinar, I did 3 webinars with Sitecore and Sitecore Personalized and CDP, by the way, taking through various stages from foundation to some interesting use cases and scenarios. You can probably see the sneak peek of that demo there because that was the PlaySummit website. So, but I heard that they built that out. Dramatically. So I'm excited to see the current version.
And returning to SXA is still expected to be one of the central parts of the XM, whatever will be with XM Cloud, whatever will get it, probably will get it initially in the same functional way as we got Horizon initially. But again, Horizon, will it become Symphony? I have only seen one screenshot of Symphony, and it looks very like to Horizon. We know that Horizon works with SXA already, and I think all these bits of functionality will settle down XM Cloud.
Yeah, I think it'll be part of the same suite with Pages, meeting management. Horizon Symphony is going to be the one-stop shop for all things, right? Managing all your digital experiences, where Horizon is focused on managing the web channel, right? So it would be probably part of the Symphony suite. That's what I would imagine. Alrighty, well, let's go ahead and move on. So Martin, I'll go ahead and hand this off to you to talk us through how to do Sitecore upgrades the right way.
Sure. So I hope everyone sees my screen pretty well. Just give me a second, please. Right, so this is my presentation I've done originally at SUCON Europe a month ago. This only says about XP and how you upgrade XP to XP. This is the first part. I'm going up to do another presentation, exactly what we spoke earlier about, moving from XP into composable world. And I will tell you the strategies how to do that. That will be my next presentation, basically the second part of Sitecore upgrades. But we've got so far, and I will show you only about XP. So here we go. Familiar screen, right? So 7 hours of only 220 hours allocated for my upgrade project. I spent troubleshooting from one of this screen to another. This is yellow runtime screen I hate most of all, and it's first of all not that much obvious. And as soon as I sort out one of them, there will be another one, and again and again and again. So I struggle this presentation. So today I will take you through the insight learned and struggled out from the performing Sitecore upgrades. And I will talk you through tools, tactics, approaches to updating content. Of course, we will talk about upgrading code base, configuration, and finally, the most interesting containers. So also there is lots of material covered here, so I'll try to fit it in the allocated time and make it quicker. But I want to say straight ahead that everything spoken today is very in detail covered in my blog post. So at the very last slide will be linked to my blog post, and there will be everything is here, plus much more references and more helpful material. So let's start. Why do we upgrade? And the reason for upgrade basically is very simple. This is a carrot and stick motivation. That's what Sitecore gives us. So every new year, mainstream support expires for one of your version of Sitecore, which means Sitecore still provides security update, they provide fixes, but they do not support development and compatibility queries. So here is the table. You can see the versions and the mainstream support and extended support end dates. That was a stick, but now let's say about carrot. Companies upgrade due to the new features or new experience. For example, with the latest 10.2, you can use Next.js to statically render MVC into HTML and incrementally convert MVC applications to GSS application. That opens the door to modern opportunities to many legacy MVC sites, which could be now incrementally converted. And having the latest version is especially valuable in front of Composable DXP, parts of which will already take place. And we've been already talking a lot about it today, and there will be much more conversation in the nearest days. So let's talk about planning. Proper planning is the key to success. And how do we do planning? So we first of all need to assess the solution. Mostly how much is the existing solution customized. So when you upgrade in vanilla Sitecore, that would cost you minimal effort. But with more custom code, the more labor you expected to commit. Are there any technical debt or issues? This will affect your timescale. They will impose additional risks. So it's better to know all of them in advance. It's better to inspect project documentation. Of course, if you get an access to any of existing docs, that would be a perfect place to start. And that will likely give you some answers to the previous points. You may want to find details about the environments, about the code branches, which code branch deploys to which environment. Also, you'll be interested in the details about existing CI/CD pipelines. One of the biggest things you will do is to identify the custom configuration which was made on top of vanilla Sitecore. I will later explain how to do that, so keep watching. Last but not the least, you better talk to stakeholders, because who, if not, they know the details and they are mostly interested in success. So please talk to them. So it sounds logically that the more versions you jump through, the more complicated upgrade process will be. However, that's not a rule of thumb. Some versions have very minor changes, and those could be updated with minimal efforts, but some others are very opposite. They could be difficult as the HAL. So that is exact reason why version 9.3 stands out of this version chain. So it happened that it took most of breaking changes, lots of deprecations, and lots of internal housekeeping improvements, plenty of redundancies in kernel, and lots of all that than any other version did have. One of the most valuable planning activities is to go through release notes for every single version you have on your upgrade path. And please pay special care to these two sections, which is deprecated, removed, and breaking changes. So with them, you can identify the functionalities which are not more supported, including any third-party add-ons modules. And it also may suggest you some alternatives. With new platform features, license files sometimes changes. And if you have even the most permissive license, your old license file may be incompatible with the newer version. So that was exactly what happened when version 9 was released. So it's also good to care of that in advance, as the process of issuing new license takes some time, and it will be a hard blocker for your team. So please keep in mind, and please check that with your account manager. So when it comes to upgrading, there are two primary approaches to consider. The first is upgrade existing instances. So that means when the upgrade is applied to all the environments and is executed on all existing instances. And the second one is clean approach, where we create a clean environment and Sitecore instances that runs in parallel to your existing instances, and we then finally move data and fix compatibility issues. So for development environments, my personal preference is always to go the second scenario, and we will be discussing that one over the rest of this presentation. Every solution is very unique, but the more unique is your team. So your estimates might consider these bespoke factors along with the previous relevant experience of your team members. So I have this diagram, but please make sure this is very optimistic view on team of 2 experienced Sitecore professionals who are performing the upgrade in 4 typical sprints. So while sharing the pool of tasks between each other, one of them is primarily focused on the code base, while another more cares about DevOps things. And once again, this is not a guidance of any sort, nor assessment. This is just a high-level view on team's activity through the sprints. So before heading to upgrade tactics, let's quickly recap some of upgrade tools which we did have over the time and how did they perform. So this diagram shows that at every single time, there is an official upgrade solution for an existing instances, every time, every version. So the first is Express Migration tool. in a lift and shift, you can use this Express migration tool to move over the data from your old instance to new one. That's supported to migrate from previous old versions to Sitecore 9 initial version. This tool copies items and files from one Sitecore instance at a time. This tool supports migration of the remote service. And for those who had Web Forms for Marketers, it did support Web Forms for Marketers. The next one after it was the Update Center, which was introduced in Sitecore 9.0 Update 1, and it stayed valid up to Sitecore 10.1. So what you can find is the upgrades. You can download them, install, and manage these updates, hotfixes for Sitecore platform and for some Sitecore modules. The Update Center accesses a package management service provided by Sitecore, but you can install and provide the service yourself. This is a connection string at the bottom, which actually stays in control of that relation. So next, let's talk through some update tactics that can significantly help your upgrade process. So one of the most important is that fixing the state is crucial, and it's being able to switch between states which you have fixed as quick as possible is crucial for productivity when working on instance upgrade, because small mistakes are inevitable and we actually need some sort of undo button for the whole process. So we already have that for code base. We have Git with its ability of switching between branches almost immediately. But what about published site? What about indexes, certificates, and all that minors that matter? Even database backups, these are not that fast and straightforward to get through. So what comes into your mind is basically fixing the whole state of a working machine. So something that virtual machines could do for us. And luckily, we already have one of such tools out of the box. This is Hyper-V, and this is free. This is included in every Windows Pro that you have. It's extremely fast with solid-state drives. It has maximum integration with your operation system. It allows you moving backups between the hosts and even in the cloud. It has perfect networking option, remote management, universal virtual drives. However, you will find that you need a relatively fast solid-state drive, and you should mind the disk space because it easily gets eaten by the multiple snapshots as much as you progress with the upgrade. In my opinion, having 1 terabyte drive is probably that minimum which you need to have a productive work. Now we are confident with reverting bad things quickly, but what about redoing those successful steps? Because with a lot of monotonous and repetitive actions, one could lose very much valuable time for things they will have to redo again and again. So let's think about some example. Let's say someone spent last 2 hours upgrading NuGet references for a Helix solution that has 100 projects on it. And unfortunately, last minute, something went totally wrong. So you now know how to restore the latest Hyper-V checkpoint, which takes less than a minute. But should you repeat these monotonous steps again and again and again for lots of these projects? So the first thing that comes in mind, why not to make restore point more often? But well, creating restore point for every minor step seems to be an overkill here. And also Hyper-V will quickly take all of your disk drive space. So it's fairly difficult to perform an upgrade of everything from the first attempt. So we'll have to repeat the successful steps again and again and again. So the only matter would be to automate them. So PowerShell built in your operation system, it's best and naturally fit for these activities. And you can leverage PowerShell for any sort of automation, for system tasks, for jobs, must replace configuration, which is my favorite when I do replace the code snippets with regular expression one-liners. You can use it for backups, restore databases, to manage web applications, infrastructure, regardless local or cloud. So you can leverage Sitecore PowerShell remote on top of your PowerShell. That gives you ultimate control on top of your instances, of course, if you have an admin right there. So you will be able to manage content, you will be able to control security, publishing, indexing, so anything just come into your mind. So what could be a good idea to write these scripts for? In addition to above points, consider scripting some activities that take longer to complete and for which result in a minor textual change in the files. Like returning to my original example of upgrading NuGet references of a large solution, which took 2 hours to complete. On a disk drive, it ends up with just a few lines of difference in a project or packages files, which means comparing the difference before and after with the diff tool, it's fairly easy to use PowerShell in order to process all such files performing regular expression replays. So not being a master of that kind of activity, you will unlikely to succeed from the first attempt, but with a quick and easy checkpoint restore option, you'll quickly master it. And after all, you will end up with this artifact successful script that could be used for your runtime upgrades with minimal or no alteration on this on any other project. So I wrote a very good long article about PowerShell best practices and all the aspects of leveraging it. Please stick to my blog. I will share the link at the end. In some cases, when you are performing a jump to a following version, or maybe just few, and your solution is relatively simple and close to vanilla, it makes sense of pitching proof of concept. So this will either give you a quick win, or if it doesn't, at least it will identify all the traps and things to improve in your upgrade process. So ideally, that should be a one-day job for a single professional, so that easy fail, quick fail. It's also highly desirable to obtain a recent backup of master database. And I do realize it's not always possible, sometimes because of the volume or because of the organizational security policy, especially for those who work as external contractors. But why do you need that database for? Firstly, you will restore it along with your old solution so that it gives you a chance to verify your code base which you obtained. It does and works exactly the same as on the published websites. And the next, you will update your solution and you will use this database with a new solution instance to ensure that also looks and works exactly as it performed before an upgrade. Since upgrade process takes decent amount of time, it may be a case when a new Sitecore version release gets meanwhile. And my best advice will be to stick to a newer version. So first of all, it may not be an easy task to do, especially if you are working for a partner. If you're not working for an end client, that will be difficult to negotiate, and the version has been signed off. So it will take lots of effort to persuade stakeholders to consider newer version, and you have to motivate your arguments pretty well. Upgrading the solution well when you are halfway done adds some time, but it will cost you much less than upgrading after you went live. So I had this example in my past while working on upgrades to 10.0.1, and when newer 10.1 got released, which actually cost me much less efforts than if I would keep progress with 10.01. Last but not the least, this advice may seem to be very obvious, but please take it seriously. Document every minor step, decisions, solutions, and motivation. You will likely to go through that again, maybe several times. And save your scripts either. Even better job would be if you could wrap all your findings into a blog post and share the challenges and solutions with the rest of the world, because blogs are indexed and you'll help so to many other people. And I had that several times in my career when I Googled out my own blog post with the solution while facing the challenges. And because I did that, this presentation became possible. Now let's talk about content migration. When asking my colleagues what was the biggest challenge with their upgrade experience, almost everyone responded that it was migrating the content. But before migrating the content, depending on your level of ownership, it may be a good idea to undertake content maintenance. So most of these points you see are optional, however helpful. Speaking about the last point, from version 9.1 default Helix folders, they now come out of the box with well-known universal IDs. But lots of existing Helix solutions were done earlier before 9.1, and they have folders that have exactly the same path, but their ID do not match those coming out of the box in the later versions, which are well known. So those will be likely serialized under incorrect parent ID, and you'll need to revoke serialization to match the correct folders coming out of the box. Again, as I mentioned earlier, you can do one-liner to do PowerShell regular expression replace, but again, do that carefully. So what are options for migrating the content? We all know Sitecore packaging, which is the default way of occasional exchanging items between some instances. Every Sitecore developer knows this tool. However, it's extremely slow. It does not work well with large packages of few hundreds of megabytes, so would not recommend it. There is a Sidekick module, and it has content migrator, which uses rainbow serialization. So it copies items between instances. It does it in multi-threaded way. And unlike working with packages, this goes ultra fast. But keep in mind that both servers need to be target and destination. Both of them need to have this content migrator installed. So you also heard about Sitecore Result tool, previously built with Hedgehog, which was acquired by Sitecore. You probably heard this as a tool for identifying the differences between databases, but it offers quite intelligent way of copying items between the servers. Unfortunately, this software is not free and it requires license. It does not even have a demo, so you need to have a license to benefit from that. There is also a script to migrate content between Sitecore instances with Sitecore PowerShell extension. It's been written by Michael Verst, who is a maintainer of PowerShell extension. So basically, this is a tool from the author. And it also leverages unicorn and rainbow serialization. The script is extremely fast, but of course, it also requires PowerShell extension with remoting enabled on the both instances. Another built-in tool to copy items between the database is the one that is shipped with the control panel. The way to make it work is you need to plug the target database as an external database to Sitecore so that it becomes seen in Sitecore database selector. And then you will be able to copy items between the databases in both ways. However, it's still got limited functionality and it is relatively slow. So all the previous methods are still being valid, but if you are migrating content to 10.1 or newer, there is much better way of dealing with the content and database upgrade, which I will explain in detail in a few minutes. You may see this watermark as a hint that suggests the right answer. Next, along with the content, you may want to migrate content security. So there are several options to transfer users and roles from one instance to another. You can use the standard package designer so that you can add the roles and users you would like to package up and install it on target instance. As an alternative, you may use serialization so that the users and role will be serialized under serialization security folder. And you can then copy these serialized objects files to the target and then use revert option. But both of these options, unfortunately, with them, you are not able to transfer password. So the password is being reset to a random value when you use packages, or it defaults to B when using serialization. So how do we deal with the passwords in that case? So you can either reset passwords for the users manually using user manager application, or you can reset the password. You can ask users to reset the password by forgot your password option from the login screen. In that case, please make sure you have mail server configured so that users can get recovery email. There is also admin folder tool called transfer user passwords, which allows you to transfer the password from the source into target database, but you need to have corresponding connection strings and the physical access to that connection string destination to make it happen. And without having the required access, or if you don't want to go that way, you could still migrate things manually by copying them at SQL level. So the role and user data are typically stored using ASP.NET membership provider in the SQL Server core database. So these are the tables I have selected, which you need to migrate. And also keep in mind that from version 9.1, membership could be extracted from core into its own isolated security database. So you may want to check the connection strings prior to doing this exercise. So now the biggest and the most challenging part of upgrade is, of course, upgrading the code base. So before talking about that, let's start with a few helpful tricks that will help you to identify the customization to a given project. So in order to estimate the amount of customization for solution, I do the following trick. First of all, I need to have a vanilla version of Sitecore that existing solution is using. After it is up and running, I come up to a web root and do git init, so that then I commit everything. So don't worry, this is just a local git initialized within a web root. I do not push it anywhere, and I immediately delete git files after this exercise. So next, I build and publish the code base as normal so that all artifacts come above vanilla Sitecore into a web root. And finally, my Git tool of choice shows me the entire delta of the customization for that solution. And it's good because with this trick, I could also easily see all web config transforms, and I can see mismatching or altered DLLs, for example, those that have the same name, which been provided by hotfixes. This trick gives me the overall feel on how much is this particular instance customized, how it varies from the vanilla. So when previous trick mostly aims showing the overall amount of customization, this one would be more specific about the changes into the configuration. It shows all the patches and config alteration done on top of vanilla instance, so that more precise estimation could be done. From the previous step, we already have vanilla Sitecore. So what we do is to run show config tool for generating combined configuration from that vanilla instance. Then we save it into XML file, and next we again deploy, build, and publish as we do it normally. So once instance is up and running, we run show config tool again and save the output into another different XML file. So now having the actual solution configuration, we can compare it against vanilla combined configuration for the same version, of course, of the platform. And using the diff tool, you will see these differences highlighted. I personally recommend Beyond Compare, which is my tool of preference, but you can use any. And for your convenience, you could also extract the whole delta between both into a single config file, and that will be a valid patch file. You might also find that after upgrading, you face dependency hell in terms of referenced assemblies not playing well with each other. And this can take you lots of efforts to fix. So every Sitecore release contains assembly list featuring complete list of assemblies shipped with this release. You may find that in release information section. So for example, if we talk about 10.2 Platform XP, that has 400 DLLs exactly. So these DLLs must match exactly the counterpart vanilla DLLs in versions and also in size, unless that is a hotfix DLL. So with previous trick, you could identify all the mismatching DLLs, and with the second trick, you may find where those DLLs are referenced from. So you may also perform a solution-wide search for a specific faulty assembly, and then you see all the found results along with their site and byte. So at least one of the found DLLs would mismatch, and that will point you to the specific project that abuses the code, and you will identify the faulty DLL where it's coming from. So lots of issues with Microsoft and system DLLs. This issue occurs due to dependencies used in your solution project that mismatch those DLL versions that are actually shipped with vanilla Sitecore of your version. For example, your feature module uses sitecore.mbc dependency, which in turn relies on system.web.mbc. And when you add Sitecore MVC using NuGet Package Manager, it will pull the latest dependency, but not the one that was latest and referenced at the time when the Sitecore was released. I mean, the version that is vanilla. So what you could do, you could add library ignoring dependencies and then process with the correct dependency from the official assembly list. Also, you could adjust particular assembly by assembly bindings to the latest version. And since you should not modify vanilla config manually, you may employ config transform step as a part of your local build and deploy script. I want to say that situation has improved with 10.1 as the libraries have been updated to the latest versions and bindings became less strict. Also, Sitecore no longer publish no reference NuGet packages. For example, if you install the packages for 10.2, you will get a lot of dependencies installed, and that's not what we wanted. The correct way in this case is to use the dependency behavior option of NuGet Package Manager. And choosing this dependency behavior to ignore dependencies will only install the package without any of the dependencies, just the package itself. This function is also available as a parameter switch if you prefer to do things with PowerShell. And just like project-to-project references and assembly references, package references are managed directly within project files rather than using a separate package config. Unlike packages config, package reference list only those NuGet packages you directly installed into the project. So using package reference, packages are maintained in the global packages folder rather than in a package folder within the solution, which results performing faster and eat less disk space if you have numerous solutions. Also, MS Build allows you to conditionally reference a NuGet package and choose package references per target framework, configuration, platform, or any other pivots. There is also a PowerShell script, which I referenced in the blog, which could do this mass upgrade package configs to package references. As you all know, 4.8 is the terminal version of .NET Framework. So it's now being used from Sitecore 9.3 and onwards. Migrating from earlier solution will require you to upgrade target framework to every single project within your solution. So I personally prefer to do that with PowerShell one-liner, but there is a target framework migrator extension for Visual Studio that also bulk updates the framework for the whole solution you have. But of course, to benefit from this extension, you may need to upgrade Visual Studio itself first, so that it has the required target framework. You don't have to, but at least the most important, what you need to do is install latest Visual Studio build tools, which of course could be updated on its own. So the solution UR upgrade, it may reference some third-party libraries that have been discontinued. In that case, you need to do an investigation for each of those libraries so that you can decide what to do. So is this library indeed discontinued, or could it be refactored and it's been provided as a separate repository or fork? The best would be to try and to Google that. So you might not be the first person who looks for the solution. If it's open source, potentially you could handle the upgrade from the actual version yourself. So I had this experience in past and that proven to work. So does this library rely on some removed features? That would be the answer you need to find first. So sometimes it's better to remove part of the functional relying on discontinued DLL and keep going with the progress, not wasting time, rather than trying to do that. So as a good example, there is a library called Sitecore Content Search Spatial. So I came across this library, which did geospatial search. The source code has been available, but it has not been updated for 5 years so far. But meanwhile, Lucene has been removed from Sitecore, and this library became no longer relevant because this one had references Lucene. So as the outcome, the whole related business feature was temporarily descoped, only to be rewritten with Solar Spatial Search later. Speaking about dependency injection, Microsoft has become a built one into Sitecore from version 8.2. It is fast, reliable. It supports pretty everything, all the lifetimes, and just simply use that one. When you need to do upgrade, you will likely need to upgrade Glass Mapper. So if you had version 4, you will see that version 5 has pretty lots of differences. First of all, package naming has changed to reflect the version of Sitecore, which is working with, and it comes with 3 related packages now. So Glass has lots of changes in version 5, most significant of which would be a new way of accessing content from Sitecore. So previously you used Sitecore context, iSitecore context interface. So now instead of that, you have 3 new interfaces, more specific, iMVC context, iRequest context, and even iWeb forms context. These are 3 abstractions. Don't use web forms any longer. Glass controller also gone. So you just need to inherit from a normal controller, and similar happened to Glass View. Now you simply receive your model as you normally do that with a typical MVC. Glass Lazy is now default. And also when upgrading Glass, I faced a bunch of runtime errors that were difficult to identify. Eventually, I realized that happened due to lack of virtual property modifiers in model classes. So with old Glass Mapper, model properties still map correctly even without this virtual modifier, but this no longer valid for version 5. And also when you do upgrade Glass Mapper, make sure you do not override upstart classes. And you want to have them only for your foundation ORM and not to the feature, nothing like that on the feature layer. So please delete them if you update. Sitecore try to reduce breaking changes where possible, but sometimes they are unavoidable. And this comes up with Sitecore upgrades. So custom codes, some of it, and configuration still needs to be upgraded to be compatible with. As a good example, HTTP request arc context property has been removed in favor of HTTP context. So in fact, that's just been renamed. That results with a breaking change for all of the custom pipelines processes, which you all need to rewrite. But again, I use my favorite regular expression PowerShell one-liner to upgrade them all in one shot, and that works pretty well. Custom processor patched into a pipeline now require a mandatory attribute resolve equals true. So if you don't have it, you must provide that. One more change in version 9.3 that takes place with link manager in the way we get default option for building the URLs. So long story short, the internals have been rewritten to the better, and mostly it's all hidden from our eyes. What you need to know is an updated way of patching default URL options, which now looks more elegant. The solution I was upgrading had a publish and event configuration that does HTML cache clearing for different site instances. Since 9.3, such behavior became default after publish, so it actually works the other way around now. You have to actually disable HTML cache clearing explicitly if you need to do. So previous code will break, and you have to remove the whole section which you see above. But if you want to disable it explicitly, just use the bottom line. When upgrading legacy solution, you will likely to come across some of those. Sitecore support addresses issues by providing DLLs, and they also release hotfixes. Each of them sort out some certain issue which you need to investigate if that one was resolved in the version you are upgrading to. So to do so, you need 6-digit support code. To find more details by using search field at Sitecore knowledge base. It's pretty easy. And when it comes to hotfixes, they keep original name of DLL, which they simply replace. So the knowledge base code could be found from the file properties dialog, which you see right-hand side here. So once it got resolved, you may remove those DLLs without hesitation, and as well as any related configuration. SXA still not an integral part of platform in XP, and it has its own upgrade guidance released along with each other version. So I will only touch it briefly. So similar as it's true for the rest of Sitecore platform, the biggest SXA changes took place with 9.3 release. And the biggest was an velocity deprecation in favor of scribe template. As you know, that affects rendering variants, which is one of the most powerful features of SXA. And the good news is that since 9.3, SXA has a version parity with the XP platform. Web forms for marketers have been deprecated in Sitecore 9.1. So there is a community tool which helps you to convert web forms for marketers and their collected data into experience forms. This is a console app. It migrates saved data and from SQL, or if you used Mongo, from Mongo to the destination Sitecore forms database. Both Lucene and Azure Search became obsolete now, and they've been removed. So please migrate your solutions to Solr. It may take significant effort, but you have to do that. Also consider using search stacks, since it cares of installation, failover, security, maintenance, scalability. So managed Solr allows your developers to implement faster and spend more time focused on building a better search experience, less time supporting the search infrastructure. When we talk about Solr, there were two issues I had to resolve while upgrading Solr. First was related to core name mismatching index name. So in order to fix that, you may use the simple config patch, the one you see above. Second issue relates to configuration that defines Solr index. If you are indexing all fields, that must be wrapped with document option tag now, and it should be of the correct type, as the bottom snippet shows. After introduction of XConnect, there was a question on what to do with the existing analytics data from MongoDB when you do upgrade it to version 9 or version 10. To address that, Sitecore created a tool which is called XDB Migrator tool that works on top of data exchange framework. It reads from MongoDB and it writes to XConnect server. The tool uses custom collection model to be deployed with both XConnect service and XConnect indexer service. After rebuilding XDB search index, you will get the data migrated and you will see it in experience profile. It also has an optional verification feature, which is in fact a standalone database, so that it gets record of each entity being submitted to XConnect. When jumping through a high number of versions, you'll definitely face lots of Sitecore DLLs and APIs being deprecated. So I only listed few examples. And sadly, deprecation will require you either rewriting the code that consumes those DLLs or totally eliminate that business feature. Of course, there are much more deprecations. Just go through release notes for each version and you will learn which DLL has been moved out. Okay, the most interesting part, Sitecore 10. So what's to keep in mind? First of all, containers. This is the main feature of 10. We know containers are immutable. That means that any change to the file system within container will get lost as soon as container restarts. So with Docker, you are no longer deploy just your application code. Container is now the unit of deployment itself, which includes the whole environment, operation system, application dependencies, and whatsoever. So therefore, your build process will have to be extended to build Docker containers and push them into container registry. The good news is that your code base will remain the same. However, there are minor changes in debugging. So now you need to connect to specific container, find the process you want to debug and attach to it. So that's one extra step. Also, yeah, that's the change. Database were not 100% compatible between the versions. So previously, one had to run upgrade script against core and master in order to attach both to your vanilla target instance and progress with the rest of upgrade. Upgrade script ensure the schema and default out-of-the-box content gets updated, applying the intermediate changes between both versions. So the idea came to consideration was that supplying empty database with vanilla platform would eliminate the above need for everyone who updates database to operate at SQL admin level. But every version has its own unique set of default items. So where do we keep them? So since we operate containers and we keep container first way of thinking, there was clear need of storing this somewhere at a file system level. So it was matter of choosing and adopting the suitable data provider. So Protobuf from Google was a perfect choice because it's ticking all the boxes, and moreover, it's a very major technology. With that in mind, now having a database full of content, you can upgrade to a newer version without even touching it. SQL databases stay up to date, and the rest of default content gets updated by just substituting Protobuf data resource files. Sitecore called this approach items as resources. I would recommend you looking into items as resources plugin for Sitecore CLI, so that you can create Protobuf files that contain all of your items and bake them directly into your container images. And I want to highlight that both CLI serialization and Unicorn being supported. So how do we upgrade, let's say, from version 8.2 database to, let's say, 10.2? So since 10.1 and onwards databases come with no content, it becomes a matter of removing default items from SQL database, leaving the rest of content untouched. That default content would come from actual items resource file, which will instead be placed under app data items folder. So if you upgrade it from 10.1 or newer version, it comes to purely replacing these resource files which naturally fits container file system way of doing business. There's also a new tool comes into play. It's called Sitecore Update Up tool. So it updates core, master, and web databases. You must download and use the version of the tool that is appropriate for the version and topology that you're upgrading from. So previously you've been searching the tool by the version you're upgrading to, but this one you're upgrading from. It also helps with official module resources file for upgrading core, master, and web databases for SXA, SPE, data exchange framework, even Horizon and both CRMs like Salesforce connectors. So the next question would be, how do we containerize modules? So if, for example, I am a maintainer of a module, what do I do? So first of all, you won't be able to install package the way we did before, Sitecore package. If the one drops DLL into a bin folder, that's no longer possible because bin folder been locked for the IIS user. And of course, you can go into interactive console and enable IIS user to do write operations against the bin folder, but that's not the way of doing things. And remember, containers are immutable, so all your changes assumed to be killed after it's reinstantiated. So what do you do instead? You use Sitecore asset images. So what is Sitecore asset image? This is also container, this I also image, but unlike runtime, they only are intended for stored assets. And say an asset, I mean DLL, config file, DACpack, maybe initialized PowerShell script. So everything your module may relay to. If it uses search and relies on Solr, you may also deploy Solr cores along with your models with these asset images. It is based on the smallest Windows image, which is nanoserver, just several megabytes. So how do you create those? You can create those manually. As I show on this diagram, there are two actually ways of creating it. So one of them would be if you have a package for your model, you can convert this package from zip into web deploy, and web deploy in that case will have a DACpack file. So you may take this DACpack file and place it under the database folder. There is a tool called Docker Asset Image Creator from Robert Hawk that automates that step because it's quite clumsy. But you don't have to do that. You can also rely to item as resource files. So again, if you have CLI version 4, or you may install the plugin that creates asset images. So you'll create prototip file and you drop it under items folder, and that will do the same. So last but not the least, testing the upgrade. So what do you need to test? At least you need to ensure the following. You may ensure overall site health looks and feels as it should. Make sure the integrations are not broken and the editing experience is not broken. So you need to go through all of these steps to check it up. And it's a good practice to see your task tracker for the recent tasks and see if those been picked and also upgraded and function well. When it comes to whether use manual or automated, you need to trade off, because without automation, it becomes effort consuming to test everything, but you cannot automate absolutely everything. So please find the right balance. What is absolutely crucial when you go live is monitoring. So when you do that, go and inspect every single log for exception. If you find some, address it. You also may want to watch the metrics for having some sort of anomalies and identify what's going wrong and take some action. If you haven't updated your CI/CD pipelines, you have to, because newer version requires newer CI/CD pipelines. You also need to do security hardening, and there is luckily an official guide from Sitecore how you need to do that, what you need to tune up, which things you need to disable, and which access you need to close. If you are lucky enough to have a content freeze, please have it. But if you are not, if your business does not allow you such luxury, then you'll need to address the difference. And using PowerShell extension, you may, for example, create a Delta package and apply it and publish to a new instance before going live. Finally, switching DNS is the moment when you go live with your new solution. And there is a potential trap when you do switching DNS. Make sure that you reduce your TTL setting for your domain record early in advance, so the changes take effect immediately, and then you revert these changes after going live. Then you will have a maturing period, at least for 2 weeks, I would recommend, where all your environments will run in parallel, but your website is being served by a new upgraded instance. This is where you should be extremely careful and watch all the metrics, all the logs, everything. So once you're happy with that, you can destroy all the old environments, and that actually concludes your upgrade. This is my blog, where I have covered everything said in this session, and there is much more to that. For example, I didn't say about dynamic placeholders, which have been introduced in version 9, and in this blog post you will find how to do that. I didn't cover anything about commerce. There won't be anything in this blog because I'm not that deep in e-commerce, but from what I know, commerce has its own upgrade guidance, and it's quite painful procedure to upgrade it. So probably that's it. Thank you for watching. Maybe you have some questions. You're welcome.
Martin, that was amazing. That was remarkably comprehensive. So many things covered and on point. Wow, this has to be probably the most comprehensive walkthrough of upgrades that I've ever seen.
That isn't it. And if you follow this guidance or whichever is posted on my blog post, I can promise you that you will save 3 to 4 times that you will normally spend on upgrade, because I went through extremely difficult and insane upgrade scenarios when I was put into conditions with little time allocated for that. So I had to struggle it all by my own. Another thing that I didn't mention is that when you go live, it's good to go and do visual checks for your components, because I had example in my past where it all went well, but I noticed that upgraded solution did not have one icon, and it turned out to be an SVG icon with SVG handler that for some reason didn't work well while it should work well. So I went deeper into a code and found quite a big issue, which was unobvious at all. So there was no runtime error, there was no code compilation error. I only spotted it just by visual comparison.
Wow. Well, sometimes things come out from unexpected places. We recently did an upgrade and everything looked great. And that's why I like how you added the maturing period. You have to watch how the application performs. And ideally you want to run some kind of load test to mitigate that risk. But we had an issue where everything performed fine until we scaled the system, and then some of the pipelines, the way some of the processors were written in version 10, I can't remember which ones now, were different from version 8.x. I can't remember the original version that the team was migrating from. But everything was fine. Everything was working fine until they got hit with traffic, and then the XDB started tripping up a bit. So that, even things that you wouldn't expect will come out of that maturation period. I do want to add a +1 for search stacks. I have to do it because one, they're cost efficient. Two, it's so many other benefits that come with working with the guys. We have a whole, I think, webinar dedicated to search stacks that we did with Varun, but we in the Sitecore space aren't familiar with Java. We're not pros at it. We're not really familiar with solar, unless you can take advantage of economies of scale. If you have a solar farm already running and you can tap into that, it's a lot cost efficient, and it's a lot more effective to run it through search stacks. They take care of disaster recovery, backups, security, all the things that we don't naturally think about when we deploy solar, right? So when was the last time someone talked about a disaster recovery site for solar or backup strategy? That doesn't usually come up. These are the things that we have to consider, especially with large solutions. Once you start playing with large implementations with millions of content items, restoring, re-indexing that entire content tree, let's say if something were to go down, you had to restore it, it'll take hours. It'll take hours to rerun, to reindex. Even though the database restore can, let's say, take under half an hour, you'll be done with the website restore under half an hour. Your whole site would still be done if it's heavily relying on search. So +1 for search stacks. And I also have to plug subscription pricing in Sitecore. So if you're going through an upgrade, talk to your Sitecore rep if you're still on perpetual licensing. That actually feeds back into my topic previously. The subscription Sitecore licensing includes SXA and JSS for free. If you're on perpetual, you have to purchase those, pay additional.
That's correct.
For having those. So if pricing makes sense, because pricing models are different for subscription, there's a promotion that Sitecore sometimes runs for those who do migrate from perpetual to subscription, and there is a requirement of an upgrade. So if you're going through an upgrade already, might as well see if they have that promotion active, because that could be cost efficient, a good time to switch to a new model. And then
one of the things I want to stress is the load test. If you jump to a major version, this is the must to be done. This is what I said at SuCon, but because I was quite in a hurry, I didn't mention here, but you fail in catch this up. Also, number-wise, I want to say that there was a case of upgrading a website, that actually a solution that has 6 running websites. It was on 8.2, and the target's supposed to be 10.1 in containers. So the initial allocation of time was absolutely incorrect. It was about 260 hours for a single developer, who was me. So that was very less than it should be. So if I was given an estimate, such project should be estimate around 600 hours, or maybe split for 1 or 2 developers. You don't need 3 developers for that. Actually, I managed to do things quite quicker than 600 hours, even quicker than 400 hours. But it was not 260, that's for sure. And definitely you need to talk more to your client, because in my case, there was some sort of miscommunication. And also, while I was doing this upgrade, they released the 7th website onto their existing instance. So that added a little bit. That's a story. There was a question.
I think someone was raising the hand. I saw the flash.
Yeah, me too. Any questions?
If you're speaking, you might be on mute. No? One thing I would also add while we're at it, the parallel approach is definitely a lot superior. Sitecore will most likely work with you. I mean, we don't have an official word from Sitecore for all these types of upgrades, but every single time we had to do a parallel setup for Sitecore, especially if you're on, let's say, perpetual license, that creates an issue with licensing, because now you're running more servers than you're allowed to. But if you contact Sitecore in advance or talk to your Sitecore partner, and they can help you with that, every single time Sitecore is okay with it. So temporarily increasing the number of servers, Sitecore does run what they call a ping report that pings the license to see how many servers are actively running it, how many users, and so forth. So Sitecore can detect that there's a large, larger than allowed by the license number of servers. They're completely fine with that, temporarily expanding that, allowing to run more servers during the time of the upgrade.
Yeah, that's been introduced in 9.1.1, as I remember. And because they have all the stats, someone on Slack channel was wondering today what proportion of the total Sitecore solutions use GSS and SXA or headless. So someone was asking for numbers, but they didn't yet reply.
It's upgrades with headless are also a lot easier. So if you're if you're on the headless implementation, it'll be a lot easier to migrate because there's a lot less backend code that's traditionally written for GSS implementations, for instance. In fact, in my experience, anywhere from 50% and up is what you save in terms of backend effort on a headless implementation. So,
when it comes to XEM Cloud, you don't even need to do these upgrades because they will do it for you. What you have is you have your storefront or some sort of front-end solution. So if your endpoints remain the same, if they serve you the same data, why would you upgrade it at all?
yeah.
Unless the data stays the same.
Exactly. One of the things I also I really like that you mentioned about watching the Sitecore logs. I frequently see developers and architects just powering through the upgrade, and they're just happy to get, especially with a complex solution, they're just happy that things are coming up and working, and they almost don't want to touch it. The first thing I always ask is check the logs. Even though the site could be working, you could have all kinds of ghosts crawling, behind the scenes. Verifying the Sitecore functionality also, in addition to that, the website might, again, be working. Things could appear to work on the front end. You could have some issues in the XDB with the migrated data. You could have some hiccups, some weird, strange behavior errors coming up in the client UI. So that's where logs come into play. That you'll probably be able to catch a lot of those if you look at the logs. All right. Well, Martin, thank you so much. I'm glad we recorded this. Like I mentioned previously, we'll post the recording on YouTube. We'll share the link on social, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Slack. Hopefully, a lot of people watch this. This will definitely make their life a lot easier. What's the best way to ask questions, or what's the best way to find you if someone has questions about this video or about your blog?
The best way to find me would be this. Please contact me with Slack. Sorry, am I sharing? Yeah. So that's my Slack. This is my Twitter. And also I am standing behind Sitecore Telegram channel. Now, since recent, there are 3 channels. There are also Audio Cloud and Content Hub channel for specifically these products. So the best would be probably Twitter or Slack, but I very encourage you subscribing to Telegram channel.
Excellent.
Actually, you may see what I have on my T-shirt.
Nice, very nice.
Telegram.
Very nice. Excellent. Well, thank you everyone for joining. Again, this recording will be available on YouTube. Keep an eye on some videos coming out from SuckCon. There are plenty of valuable and useful presentations that will be posted, and I'm sure some of those will be coming out on user groups, so keep an eye on those. A lot of user groups are still virtual. And we'll see you next time in 2 to 3 months. Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Thanks for inviting me. Bye-bye.